Good afternoon. Welcome to the April 29th, 2020 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. This is rescheduled from our April 15th, 2020 meeting. In accordance with Executive Order number 16 issued by Governor Bill Lee, the Murfreesboro Planning Commission April 29th, 2020 meeting will be conducted electronically, and there will not be physical public access to the meeting as necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare in light of the coronavirus. The public may view the meetings electronically through Murfreesboro City TV, which is broadcast on Comcast Xfinity Channels 3 and 1094, and on AT&T UVerse Channel 99. The meeting can also be streamed on Roku, YouTube, Facebook, and the city's website. So we'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum present, and determination that the meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans and Murfreesboro City citizens in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Our first item of business is to approve the minutes of the March 11th, 2020 and March 18th, 2020 Planning Commission meetings.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
If I could cut in, we will need a vote on whether or not to conduct the meeting electronically.
Right.
A roll call vote, please.
We will call on Ms. Jaco for a roll call vote for holding the meeting electronically.
Ms. Garland?
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Silas?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye. Okay, motion passes, and we will move on to the minutes. And if there are any corrections or additions to the minutes from March 11th or March 18th, please let us know. And if not, we'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes from March 11th and March 18th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And Ms. Jaco will take a vote, please.
Ms. Garland?
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Silas? Mr. Silas?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye.
Thank
you. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Our next item is one item of old business. We have the Villas at Amanda Square site plan for 23 single-family attached dwelling units, townhomes, on 1.43 acres, zoned RM16, located along the east side of Southeast Broad Street. Centennial Construction, LLC, and Landmark Homes of Tennessee, Inc. are the developers. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Chair Jones. This project was first reviewed and deferred at the February 19th Planning Commission meeting to allow time for the design team to address parking, revise formal open space, patio areas, and provide a materials board. This is a site plan review for the Villas at Amanda Square, a residential development for 23 single-family attached dwelling units, which consist of 17 two-story, two-bedroom, single-family dwelling units and 3 buildings with 6 two-bedroom flats. The property is zoned RM16 and consists of 2 lots located along Southeast Broad Street. The site is 1.46 acres and access is via Southeast Broad Street. The building materials are brick, veneer, and cementous siding. Any outstanding comments will be addressed with the design team upon Planning Commission approval. Planning Commission's approval should be subject to all staff comments. And I believe the applicants are available to answer any questions as well as myself.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kerr. I believe, as I did originally, I will abstain on this item. I will conduct the meeting and call for the vote, but I will abstain. So any questions, comments from the Planning Commission or anyone else on the staff regarding this item or anything else from the developers team?
Hello, my name is Nathan Melson. I'm with the development team. I'm with Civil Infrastructure Associates. We're the civil engineer on the project. We'd like to just go over the changes, if that'd be all right.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. With me today is Vicki Sullivan, who has handled the detailed engineering design for the site plan you see today. Also is Gary Wisniewski and Ty Carter, who are the developers for Amanda Square, or Village of Amanda Square. So, like Amelia said, zoning is RM16, 1.43 acres on 2 parcels, which will be combined. The project is located on Southeast Broad, south of Brable Pike, and north of Middle Tennessee Boulevard. Surrounding neighborhood is RM16 or RD, Greenpoint Village Apartments to the northwest. Undeveloped land to the north, Silver Trace Townhomes to the northeast, and Silver Point Subdivision, which is a duplex subdivision, to the east or southeast. And southwest, of course, is bordered by Broad Street. Again, 23 single-family units. The north building, as you can see on the site plan in front of you, has 11 two-story townhome units. The south building is 6 two-story townhome units and 6 flats or single-story flats. The HVAC units will all be located inside the each unit. There's actually 52 spaces with 3 handicap spaces, which was increased from the previous plan that y'all saw in February. Formal open space has increased from the previous plan, and we have also provided direct sidewalk connections from both buildings to the right-of-way. Now I'll turn the microphone over to Mr. Sullivan to discuss further changes with the site plan.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Chair Jones, Planning Commission, for hearing our application today. We came out of this with some guidance from the Planning Commission. I think we implemented the conditions that the Planning Commission asked us to do. We've supplied the material board, so you have it. The 3 main site elements that we had were dealing with the building and the open space and the parking. If we were asked to move unit 12 and 13 to the back of the south building to get it closer to the parking, and then move a couple parking spaces up to the front, and then move the formal open space from the north side of the drive to the south side of the drive. We accomplished all this. It took several go-arounds, and what we ended up doing, we were asked to move 12 and 13 to the back. We ended up moving 3 units to the back. That way, we could address the other concern with parking. We were able to do 4 parking spaces up in the front and still have a larger formal open space area. The gazebo was originally in building setback, so we couldn't do the full roof that we wanted. We moved the gazebo inside the building setback, so it will have a full roof covered. And we were able to add a sitting area back on the north side. So we looked at the open space, and instead of having just straight sidewalks, we thought we would soften it up. And we basically turned sidewalks into paths. And I think if you look at the landscaping plan, that it looks really nice now. So we feel like we've addressed all the conditions and maybe even exceeded the conditions that the Planning Commission asked us to incorporate into the plan. I believe that catches most of the site plan revisions. I don't know if someone else on our team has anything to say. If not, Chair Jones, thank you.
Thank you all, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Melson. Any comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
I'll make one comment. I know at the last meeting there were a lot of concerns about whether or not the property would look well from the roadway and the positioning of some of the buildings. And clearly these developers and architects have listened to the concerns we had. And I think they've done a phenomenal job of adjusting the site to not only be more attractive, but be more functional. So I say congratulations. And I don't know if anybody else has got comments. If they do, I'll wait. But if they don't, then I'll move for approval.
Hey, and Madam Chair, this is Ronnie Martin. I will make an additional comment too. And I know my screen's kind of fuzzy, so I look like Back to the Future zooming in and out here. But I think one of the things that, just speaking for myself, that I struggled with was the density on this site based on the actual square footage and the acreage that was here. I did call the developer, and it's been some time since we've done that, so I can't frankly remember all of the conversation. But one of the things that I think would feel better to me, I certainly, obviously the developer's got a great reputation for doing a good product. I'm not concerned about that, but it does still feel to me, while the site is different, we have forced, or it appears to me that we forced a larger number of units that would naturally fit on this site than I think do fit. And I know there's some entitlement on the zoning based on the current zoning, but I'm probably not going to be in support of this based on the density. And I'll just limit my comments to that.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from the Planning Commission?
One from Warren. I do think they've done a good job at listening to almost all of our comments related to the front, related to adding additional parking spaces so that the townhomes on the right-hand side would have parking that's close to them. The one question I had, we did have comments on the rear as it relates to stepping out on the stoop. Were you guys able to address that any, or is there any differences on the rear of the units?
We did add widow walk to the back, so we did incorporate what the Planning Commission asked for into the building design. So every building has step out, as you can see there on the elevations.
This is Chase Salas. I'd like to just go ahead and make a couple of comments as well. I understand where Mr. Martin is coming from on the density issue, but I look at this as a valuable addition to this neighborhood. Nice materials coming into that side of town. So I'm in support of this. I think it looks like a really nice product. Really like the addition of those stoops on the back. I think it looks really nice. Thanks, guys.
Mr. Halliburton?
Yes, I'll just echo Eddie's comments. I think we discussed this in very much detail at the last meeting. They have come back with what I feel like are the right responses and the right look. So I'm going to vote in favor of this application.
Any other comments and questions from the Planning Commission members?
Hearing
And if
none, I
not,
move
I
for
guess
approval.
I'm sorry, Mr. Smotherman, there was a motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
Second from Mr. Halliburton. Motion and a second, and we will call for a vote. Ms. Jaco.
Before Ms.
Ms.
Jaco,
Gar,
could I get
Ms.
a clar-
Blumel?
before Ms. Jaco calls the roll, could I get a clarification on the motion that it's subject to staff comment?
Yes, subject to staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Smotherman.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for keeping us in line, Mr. Blomley.
There you
So
go.
we have a motion and a second. Ms. Jaco?
Ms. Garland,
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
No.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
and one abstention, Chair Jones.
Abstain, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So motion passes with one no vote and one abstention. Thank you all very much. So moving on to the next item, which will be our consent agenda. We do have two items on the consent agenda that have been removed. The enterprise car sales preliminary plat and site plan, which are items 5C and 5G respectively. Those have been withdrawn from the consent agenda, but I'll go ahead with the other items on the consent agenda. First, we have Rutherford Crossing, third re-subdivision of Lot 1 and Garrison Cove Common Area, final plat for one lot and common area on 14.61 acres, zoned commercial highway located on North Rutherford Boulevard, Las Casas Pike, and Norris Lane, Kroger Limited Partnership developer. Next is Regal Square, re-subdivision of lots 13 through 17, final plat for one lot on 7.55 acres, zoned PRD, located on Suzanne Landon Drive and Cedar View Drive, Halo Homes developer. Salem Landing, Section 1, final plat for 117 lots on 30.71 acres, zoned RS6, located along New Salem Highway, Salem Land Company LLC developer. Cracker Barrel Old Country Store, re-subdivision of Lot 2, final plat for two lots on 4.17 acres, zoned light industrial, located along Shelby Street, Cleta Brooks developer. NHK Seating of America, second re-subdivision of Lot 1 and re-subdivision of Lots 2 and 3, final plat for four lots on 43.39 acres, zoned heavy industrial, located along Joby Jackson Parkway and Hollis Westbrooks Lane, NHK Seating of America, Inc. developer. Mandatory referral for installation of irrigation lines in public right-of-way in the Blackman Village Development, SEC Inc. is the applicant. And Veterans Plaza site plan for a fueling station and convenience market, 5,000 square feet, and commercial center, 13,437 square feet, on 3.36 acres, zoned commercial highway, located at the northwest corner of Veterans Parkway and Franklin Road, Veterans Commons GP developer. Are there any other items on the Planning Commission that any of the staff or Planning Commission members would like removed for further comment? And if none, we will take a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion. We approve the consent agenda. This is Ken Halliburton.
Thank you, Mr. Halliburton.
And I'll second Ken's motion.
And we have a second, Mr. Smotherman. So motion and second on the consent agenda. We'll take a vote, Ms. Jaco.
Ms. Garland,
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Thank you, Ms. Jaco. Motion passes on the consent agenda. So next we will move on to Gateway Design Overlay. We have 3 items today on that. The first item is St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital initial and final design and site plan review for 813 square foot CT scan addition on 68.4 acres, zoned light industrial and GDO 3 located at 1700 Medical Center Parkway. Middle Tennessee Medical Center is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones and Planning Commission members. Our first item this afternoon is for you to consider initial design review for an addition to the St. Thomas Rutherford Hospital. As you know, that facility is currently existing and in operation, and they have identified a need for an addition to a semi-recent addition to their building. The map on the computer before you shows that this is a very interior to the property. It's very near one of their drop-offs and pickups for their ambulances. And just last year, you reviewed an addition to their CT scan facilities. They now wish to make a small addition to that addition. And so what's being requested before you is 813 square feet addition. And I have it labeled as a CT scan addition because that's what the title of the plans, but it's actually another type medical need. On the screen, you see the architectural elevations of the plan. The darkest color is where you see that addition. It is a 2-story structure, about 18 feet tall. The proposed brick colors match exactly the existing hospital. And once this is complete, it's my opinion that you won't even know that it wasn't there to begin with. The proposed brick colors are Canyon and Beacon Gray, which are a part of the existing facility. If you have driven by the facility, you probably see that they're wrapping up the additions to the floors. That, of course, is a separate request than what's here before you. Due to the small size of this request, I'm asking that you consider initial and final design review today. If you are satisfied with their plans and believe that it is fitting of the Gateway Design Overlay District, they've been able to address all of staff's comments and get them back to us in a very timely manner. And as I mentioned, I don't believe that this will be something that you will even know didn't exist when the hospital was first built. And to get them moving, I'm asking, and I think the applicants would like to ask for you to consider both initial and final design review approval today. Of course, if you'd like them to come back, it's certainly within your authority to request that they come back, and that would be part of the proper procedures. But I know sometimes when there are small matters, you choose to approve both in one meeting. Mr. Rob Whitson is with Gresham Smith, and he's representing the applicants, and he's on the computer today. If you have any questions for him, or he would like to provide some additional information, you certainly can call on him. Otherwise, if you do approve it, we would ask that you do it subject to all staff comments.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I would say I feel sure the hospital kind of has it all down pat at this point. They know what we require and what's needed, and I certainly would have no problem with the initial and final design. But what comments and questions do we have from the rest of the Planning Commission? Anything?
Chairman Jones,
Yes, Ms. Garland.
I will be abstaining from this one.
Okay, we'll have one abstention. Any other comments or questions on this item? If not, we'll be ready for a motion.
Move for approval subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Russell
Mr.
and
Chase.
Mr. Salas. All right, We'll call for a vote. Ms. Jaco?
Ms. Garland was one abstention. Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Jaco. One abstention. We'll move on to item B. Regions ATM, initial design review for accessory structure on approximately 19.3 acres, zoned light industrial and GDO 1, located along North Thompson Lane and Robert Rose Drive. Regions Bank is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you again, Mrs. Jones. The second item is another small item, and I think they would like to also ask you for initial and final design review. The property is located in the Oak Shopping Center, which I think we're familiar with. It's a larger regional shopping center that has an overall draw. If you look at the map before you, you can see that my location map points to two areas. The area to the south is on the corner of Thompson Lane and Robert Rose Drive, and that's an existing Regions Bank. I pointed to that just so you can see the location of the existing bank. And if you can tell, the arrow also points to the north to what looks like a pull-off. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. And that is the proposed location of a future ATM. And that would be an ATM for the Regions Bank. So we are considering this an accessory structure. That proposed location is very interior to the site. And this next map I've created for you zooms in on the site and it shows you that there's a cross-access aisle within the property. And then there's a current pull-off and landscape island. The plans are to locate an ATM within that landscape island, extend it so that the needed landscaping can be added, and adding striping to the area to help delineate this and show that it's not a part of the through traffic, but is for an ATM. The ATM itself is a relatively small structure. It's about 45 square feet, and you can see an image on the screen before you. The disturbed area is 0.07 acres, although the overall Oaks property is closer to 20 acres. This disturbed area is a very small area. Because it is located in the Gateway Design Overlay District, any plans for any type of improvements is required to come to Planning Commission and get Planning Commission approval. A project like this not located in the Gateway would likely be reviewed and approved administratively, so it would be something that probably wouldn't come to Planning Commission. But because this is located in an area where we have an emphasis on good design, high quality materials and standards, and it does require the Planning Commission to be that review authority, it's coming before you today. And so, Mr. Blomley, would you mind going back to the image of the ATM? Appreciate it. The proposed ATM is rendered for you. You can see in the background is some of the existing structures. They have removed quite a bit of the bright green color that was proposed to be used much more heavily, and they've really just used it for the machine itself and a little bit on the sign that shows that the height restrictions. There will be, of course, some landscaping, and something we looked at for this property is there's a significant TVA easement that crosses it. And you may have seen some stumps out there where TVA comes in periodically. And despite what local ordinances require, if there's landscaping in or very close to that easement, they do require it to be removed. And as a matter of fact, take it out themselves. Where the proposed landscaping is for this ATM is not located at that easement, so we feel comfortable with what's being proposed there. I did meet with the architect and the applicants, and they are going to participate in improvements to Robert Rose Drive. Right now, you may be aware that Mr. Griffith and his team are working on adding a right turn lane, Robert Rose Drive onto Thompson Lane. And that's been designed, and I think that they're currently requiring any properties that they need for that improvement. The Regions Bank, located on the corner, will be providing funds for their fair share of the improvements that need to happen on that corner. So that's something that I wanted to point out to you. The design team is on the Zoom meeting today. Mr. Michael Foster is the architect, and I think he's leading the project. He's available, as is Philip Piercy and Elizabeth Hill. I think they'd like to provide some additional information and their reasoning behind the design of the ATM. I did ask them to look at the existing facility, look at the architecture of the existing buildings and the roof line, and do what they can to fit in within this area, although they don't have to mimic it. So what they have before you now is their proposed plans. If it's available, I think that they would like to go ahead and provide some additional information to you about this. And of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions. If you're comfortable with this design, we'd ask that you approve initial and final design review today. If you think that they need to work on it, they're prepared to come back and follow that regular cycle and come back at a final design review, because initial design review typically focuses on architecture and final design review is the final site plans. But they're prepared either way today. If you like what they're showing, they're prepared to move forward with initial and final. But if you'd like to see more, then they're ready to come back as well. But this time, can Michael Foster speak to the project, please?
Thanks, Margaret. And I'll speak very briefly, and I believe Philip has more to say. He's the civil engineer on the project. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Foster.
Okay. So as far as the context and the design, these are relatively standardized units that generally consist exclusively of a green anodized metal. So here, every effort has been maintained to sort of tone it down. We want to blend in. We want to be a part of the oaks and to improve the context, not detract from it. So what you're seeing here, the stacked stone, is a palette that we've reviewed with the city so far. It is intended to match everything behind it, and additionally, the strip adjacent at one of the out parcels here. Additionally, the site light poles, all the colors are meant to blend in as if they've always been there. The other thing, this has already been covered, but did want to note that all of these curb cuts are existing. We're adding more pervious surface, not impervious, and we are adding landscape. Philip, did you have anything to add?
Not really. I mean, I'll just point out that we appreciate the staff's recommendation to kind of cover both the preliminary and the final here, if that's kosher with the board. But it seems to be a pretty straightforward project. The site is kind of laid out for an ATM already, so it's pretty minor revisions.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Any questions and comments from the Planning Commission, and specifically in regard to your thoughts on initial and final design review?
Margaret Ann, going back to the sign ordinances that we passed some time ago, and I'm going off recollection, which is dangerous, but the canopy has signage on it, and I don't remember if we said no banners on the canopy or no signage on the canopies. Do you remember?
I believe that signage is allowed on the canopies. What they have may exceed what's allowed. I'm not quite sure. You will draw a rectangle around the words, but certainly we allow signage on canopies, although I suspect they may have more signage than is permitted. I'm not sure about the banners. I'm sorry.
Banners were approved to not be put on canopies at gas stations.
There you go. Thank you, Amelia. That's what I was recalling.
But so as part of approval, I mean, would you still look at the actual amount of signage on there and determine whether either it needs to be smaller or less of it, or?
Mrs. Jones, the signage is required to be shown for illustrative purposes, so it gives us an idea of scale and what it might look like. However, it is not approved by the Planning Commission or planning staff. It's something that's required to go through Building and Codes Department with a separate sign application. They've been put on notice that it's not something that's approved, but it's sometimes hard to separate out signage from the proposed architecture, because it gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. So when it comes to you, it's only for illustrative purposes. What it might look like, there's no inherent approval of their signage package when you see it.
That's what I just wanted to make sure. Thank you. Other comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
Matt, can you go to the map where we can see the placement? I just wanted to see how far it was from a turn or is it just in the middle? Can you go up?
Yeah,
The
I
other way.
think from that
Yeah.
original where Margaret Ann had the bank, and yeah, you'll see right there.
Okay, so there's no real traffic pattern.
Right.
When they come out, I was concerned about when they come out of the ATM to make sure that we're not creating a traffic issue.
The civil drawings illustrate the proposed maximum stacking. Whenever we deploy these at sites all over the region, we rarely see stacking levels beyond 2 or 3, and the existing drive lane is more than adequate to accommodate that level of traffic.
The zoning ordinance requires they design it to accommodate 4 cars in the queue lane. So there is a physical island for one of the spaces, but the other 3 spaces are located against a striped island. So they are showing the 4 queuing spaces required in the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments and questions?
If not, Ms. Jones, I'll move for approval of initial and final design subject to all staff comments.
Thank you, Ms. Garland. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Halliburton. Thank you. Ms. Jaco will take a vote.
Ms. Garland,
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Appreciate everybody's help on that. Our last item on the
Thank you.
gateway design. Oh, question? Okay, sorry. Last item on the gateway design is Jackson Heights Shopping Center, initial and final design and site plan review for changes to the building facade, addition of canopy and landscaping on 10.9 acres zoned commercial highway and GDO 4 located at 810 Northwest Broad Street. Harris Building Group, Inc. is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you again. My third and final item under the gateway portion of our agenda today is for you to consider facade changes to the existing Jackson Heights Shopping Center. The map on the screen before you shows the property, and I've got it outlined in blue and labeled as site. I think that all us longtime Murfreesboro residents are very familiar with the Jackson Heights Plaza. I've heard stories of that being the cruising spot in the 70s and 80s, so I think we're familiar with that. What you may not realize is that a small portion of that property is in the Gateway Design Overlay District. And to illustrate that on the map that you have, I created a hatched pattern. So the black diagonal stripes show the portion of the Gateway Design Overlay District. It is along Medical Center Parkway, what used to be Loki. I believe it was Loki Avenue. And you can see that a corner of the commercial center is located in the Gateway Design Overlay District. The Toots shopping or the Toots restaurant is located entirely within it, and the automotive repair facility is. And the reason this was located in the Gateway Design Overlay District is because it does front along Medical Center Parkway, and we expect at some point in the future there will likely be redevelopment, and anything that fronts on Medical Center Parkway, of course, we would want to fall in line with our standards that we hold dear in the Gateway Design Overlay District. I was approached by the applicants who are wanting to not make major changes to the facility, but clean it up, modernize it a bit, fresh coats of paint, and change some aspects of the existing design. Because that small corner is located in the gateway, I'm bringing it to you for your consideration. The majority of this project is not located within the Gateway Design Overlay District, just that corner that you saw. The I've included in your materials the proposed elevations for the project. There aren't many changes to the project, but there are some. And the team representing this application are on the Zoom call with us, Mr. Jim Janowak, and I may have mispronounced his last name. I'm sure he'll correct me when they come online in just a moment. Approached us, and we're looking to make some facade improvements to the facility, I think, which the city was happy to hear that they're wanting to make some improvements. So they're coming to you with the plan for your consideration. And at this time, I'd like to allow Mr. Jim an opportunity to present the project to you, and I'll have additional comments after his presentation.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Margaret Ann was correct. This is just an exterior facade upgrade because the center needs it. It's been, looking that way for quite some time. The building does not get any larger, any smaller. The only minor change is that there is a canopy proposed in front of the theater. We've already been in discussions with the fire department. The canopy ceiling is 16 foot 6 inches and the roof is 20, which they said is absolutely fine for any kind of emergency vehicle to go under. It's more of a contemporary design, bringing the center, up to current standards in terms of looks, but there's no new utilities being brought to the site. There's no increasing the size of the building or decreasing in any way at all. You'll also notice that there is a small landscape design plan for the small north end of the center that actually faces Medical Center Parkway, which will be screening materials so that that north portion of the center won't be quite as open to Medical Center Parkway as in the past. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any of the Planning Commission members for the design team or from a screen?
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
I was going to add that the canopy is in front of the movie theater. I think he referenced it, but it's my understanding that that proposed canopy is in front of the movie theater.
Yes.
And the proposed changes in the gateway are painting only. Then they're adding the optional landscaping. We asked them to consider putting some landscaping in that would help screen the backside of that center from Medical Center Parkway when you're heading west on Medical Center Parkway. And so that's optional. Because the changes are painting and adding some optional landscaping, we're asking if you're in favor of this for you to consider initial and final design approval at today's meeting. It just happens that the 3 items I have in the gateway today are very small items. Usually they're much bigger, and I think they take more consideration. But again, we're asking you to consider it. Jim is fully prepared to come back at final design review if you'd like him to, but considering that it's the optional landscaping and painting the building for the portion of the building actually in the gateway, they're asking for you to consider both today.
Okay. Well, as a long time Murfreesborian, many fond memories of Jackson Heights. Love it, and happy to see any updates and improvements that you all are doing there, and so much appreciated by me, and I'm sure many of us in Murfreesboro. So thank you for what you're doing. Any comments from the Planning Commission?
So I guess if I understand it, then the only structural is the canopy. Is that correct? Or are we structurally changing the front too?
No, I think Ms. Green the only structural change is the canopy. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're muted. Are we muted? No.
No. Thank you. Questions about the canopy, Mr. Russell?
No. I just wanted to understand that it was the only structure. So the other changes to the front to modernize it, are they just paint, or are there other things they're doing?
Can you hear me? This is Jim.
Yes, we can, Jim. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, there are other things. There are going to be wall panels, metal wall panels added, and other James Hardy tan panels added as well. And there's also going to be, over the courtyard, there's going to be a plexiglass roof to allow light into the very small courtyard that's there. It's not just going to be paint. Paint is mostly on the rear and the south face of the center. But these are not structural. These are cosmetic. They're just fascia materials.
Understood.
Very much like Kathy, I'm excited to see the facelift on the Jackson Heights Shopping Center. I think it would make Kathy and I happy if they'd open Playland back up and
That's right.
around on the train. But it is nice to see the facelift and the cosmetic improvement from Broad Street, as well as from the backside with that the Boys and Girls Club would view. So I think it's a very positive thing for that area, and a continuous improvement of what we currently see on Broad Street.
Chase Salas here. I'd like to just echo the comments of the previous commissioners and say say how thankful I am that they're willing to invest or reinvest in the community. It's a great area for us, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salas. Any other comments from the Planning Commission? Now we're ready for a motion.
Move for approval on initial and final design, subject to all staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Smotherman.
Second.
Second, Mr. Salas. Thank you. Ms. Jaco?
Ms. Garland,
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Again, thanks very much to the design team. Thank you, Ms. Green. Moving on to plats and plans. Our first item is Forest Point Townhomes, site plan for 63 single-family attached dwelling units on 4.98 acres, zoned RM16, located along the south side of Middle Tennessee Boulevard, west of Forest Point Drive. Advent Capital Partners developer. Ms. Kerr. Ms. Kerr?
Sorry about that. Thanks, Chair Jones, members of the Planning Commission. As you all will probably remember, this project was reviewed and approved by Planning Commission at the February 19th Planning Commission meeting. Since that time, the design team has resubmitted proposed revised plans for Planning Commission review and approval. The proposed site plan review has buildings and parking revisions so that the previously approved Forest Point development was 63 single-family attached dwelling units located along Middle Tennessee Boulevard and Forest Point Drive. The site is 4.9 acres and has 2 access locations on Forest Point Drive. Again, the development will consist the same as the previous submittal that was approved. It's 63 3-story, 3-bedroom, single-family dwelling units. And it was proposed, or it was approved, to have 2-car garages. The developer and applicant are wishing to change this to 1-car garages. What they did is they reduced the building sizes and reduced the garages to 1, and have reduced the 2-car garages to 1-car garage, and the grass strip that ran between the 2 parking spaces per unit. They removed the grass stripping, and the parking stalls have been reduced in size. The required parking for the development is 208 parking spaces. The development provides 208 parking spaces, 56 which are 9-foot parking spaces, 63 9-foot garage parking spaces, and the remaining 90 spaces are 8 feet 5 inches wide. Architecture on the elevations have been revised also to a shed roof as opposed to the pitch roof, which was previously approved. The change has also made it where the design team was unable to accommodate the wooden mounted brackets at the front entry of the porches to match the columns of the balconies. I believe Mr. Smotherman requested the last time. The building materials, however, are to remain brick and cementous sidus that was approved in February. All remaining staff comments will be addressed with the design team upon Planning Commission approval, subject to all staff comments. The architectural renderings of the color renderings do not match what they're actually showing on the architectural renderings that they submitted to me. That was a comment that I made to them on the initial design review and final design review. They did change the rear of the building to show the one-car garages. I'm available to answer any questions. I do not know if the applicant is available to answer any questions. Matthew?
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Questions and comments from the Planning Commission?
I will also say that they do have the standing approval from the February Planning Commission meeting, and if Planning Commission so wishes that they do not approve this today, they will still have the approval from the February meeting.
So these 8.5-foot spaces, are they all these that we see kind of scattered around in the fronts of the buildings and throughout? So everything else other than the garages and the space behind the garage are just 8.5 feet?
The way that they designed this, at each unit, the last 2 spaces on either end of each unit are 9-foot spaces.
Okay.
Everything in between those 4 on either end of the units, those are all 8.5, 2 per unit. Each one of those are 8.5, and then the garage is 9 foot. Then you have the common spaces that they have in between the in the amenity area location, adjacent on either side of the amenity area form open space. Those spaces will all be 9 foot wide, but the remainder of them will be 8.5 feet wide.
And so that 8.5 feet, is that, did I hear comments and maybe in our last meeting, is that our minimum width for a parking space?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. Right now, our zoning ordinance has an option for a 9-foot space or an 8.5-foot wide space. Under the current ordinance, there's no maximum number of the 8.5 foot wide spaces that can be utilized in the site. With our proposed zoning ordinance amendment that we'll be holding a public hearing on May 6th, we're looking to cap that at, or we are recommending that be capped at 20%, except in the city core overlay district. But as of right now, there's no.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley.
So, Ms. Kerr, I don't think I heard whether you did or didn't, whether they did or didn't, but did they increase the density any?
They did not increase the density. They just reduced the size of the buildings, reduced the size of the parking spots. The density is still 12.7 in an RM16.
And since they reduced the size of the building, that therefore they reduced the size of the parking spots.
And changed it from a 2-car parking garage to a 1-car parking garage. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Halliburton?
So in essence, they have reduced the number of parking spaces by 57 or so.
63 by the number of garage parking spots.
Yeah.
They took out 63 parking spots.
And you were saying that they still meet the parking requirements by doing that.
They are required to have 209 parking spots, and they have 209 parking spots with the configuration and the way that they have designed it.
And so was there something that we required originally that led them to change the size of the buildings, which caused them to reduce from a 2-car to a 1-car garage? Was that to try to accommodate some other request that we made?
I think it was just their desire. There was nothing that I feel that we required them that would require it to reduce the size to the parking spots or the buildings. I was made unaware of anything other than that they wanted to make them 1-car garages.
Maybe if there's anybody from the development team, they could explain to us, just to help us understand why we would want to reduce from a 2-car garage to a 1-car garage and reduce 63 parking spaces.
Hi, my name is Bailey Neal. I'm with Legacy South Builders, the applicant. Our desire to reduce the unit sizes was born out of a cost perspective so that we could deliver the units and what we thought the market would be willing to pay for them. Because these are 3-story units, the only way for us to really shrink the square footage was to shrink the width of them, because the garage, regardless, is still going to maintain the same depth. So we needed to shrink the width, which made it not plausible to get a second car in that garage. But as we've mentioned, we still do park at the city's parking requirement.
Okay, appreciate that. So further comments and questions from the Planning Commission, and how you feel after hearing that explanation?
I guess my comment is, I like it, but I'll make it anyway. This seems to be odd since it's so quick, such a major change right after a submittal.
And I would say we've certainly, the last 2 months have been unusual.
Yeah.
And I can see, I have no idea if that has anything to do with it, but.
I'll make a comment too, real quickly. I think, Ms. Kerr, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the development that we discussed, and I may be wrong, but like the HVAC units being in the, basically in the parking lot, right on the edge of the parking lots as well. We had a lot of discussion about that, correct?
They actually, it was discussed, and they accommodated moving the HVAC units to the front of the building and built a brick wall that will match in color the front elevation of the buildings.
So they've been moved to the front.
They were moved to the front and had to have a rock wall too, or a brick wall that matches the front of the buildings to hide the HVAC units.
But that would be parallel to the parking spaces. If I know this is kind of challenging to do this, but from my understanding, it's parallel to the parking spaces.
The parking spaces are all at the rear of the units. So
Okay.
the front of the unit is where the actual HVAC units will go.
Okay. Thank you for that. The only other comment I will make is it doesn't feel great. I understand the economics of the project, but it doesn't feel great to lose 63 potential parking spaces on what I think is already a pretty dense site. So that does change my perspective from the standpoint of me being comfortable with the development.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Other comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
Yes, I'm glad they were able to move the AC units to the front of the building and get them out from between the parking places. I never thought that was a good idea, but very much like Mr. Martin, he and I are on the same train of thought on this one. This is a pretty significant change, and to go from a 2-car garage to a 1-car garage and reduce that much storage ability that they would have there. You know, I know the garages aren't for storage, but we all know that they generally get used for some storage. And I've got a huge concern with the redesign of this project.
Mr. Halliburton?
Yeah, I would agree with Ronnie's and Eddie's comments. I'm not comfortable. I mean, Eddie's right that in essence, you're going to have 2 parking spaces because most of these people are not going to park in their garage. So I'll be voting against this change.
May I interject? This is the developer again.
Yes, sir.
Every single one of these units will have drop-down access for attics, so storage should be plentiful. These are gable roofs, so they should have plenty of storage in addition to the garage.
Okay. Other comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
I would just say, this is Chase Salas. Like the other commissioners, I feel uncomfortable reducing the amount of parking from 63 spots. Seems like a drastic move very quickly. So I too would probably be voting against this change. Thank you.
Chair Jones?
Yes.
Hey, this is Bill Huddleston. I've had my hand raised, but I'm not sure.
Sorry if your
Anybody
picture
can
isn't
see
showing
it.
on my screen. I apologize. Just
No
jump in
problem.
if I don't see you. Thank you.
No problem. I understand what some of the planning commissioners are saying about losing the spots. Do want to point out we're still at 209 spaces for only 63 units. What we've learned in the past and in working with staff, we've tried to make sure that we didn't have small garage parking spaces. In other words, trying to squeeze 2 cars into a garage that's pretty small, and then that's when they don't get utilized like they're supposed to be utilized. This way we're able to provide one good garage parking space in addition to the other 2 that we'll have outside. So I do think a good garage space will get utilized as opposed to 2 skinny ones that makes it tough to get into. And again, we are meeting the regulations with this.
Thank you, Mr. Huddleston. And so are these, I'm sorry, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, which are these?
They are 3-bedroom, 3 baths.
Okay.
And I guess one other question, with the extra space that was created by not having the garage, is any of that storage space, or is all of that converted into living space?
So the overall square footage of these units went from 1,635 square feet to just over 1,400 square feet. There is still, as I mentioned, the attic storage access, but the reason the second car cannot be turned into a garage is because that's where the stair chase runs at an angle, makes it inaccessible for a vehicle. So there is still some space to the side of that vehicle because these units are, I think, 18 feet wide. Yeah, I think these units are 18 feet wide, and we're using a 9-foot space inside. So there is.
Bailey, you might want to address the market that you are targeting here.
Yeah, just in our assessment of what's available in the area, we just felt like units at that size, we could not attain the price that was necessary to pay for the extra 240 square feet for the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms. So the project really wouldn't be economically viable to do that. I guess maybe my last comment is that the average household in the state of Tennessee has 2.1 vehicles, and we have 3.3 spaces for each of these households.
Okay.
Chairman Jones.
Yes, Ms. Garland, go ahead.
I would like to say, while it doesn't feel comfortable that we might be tight with parking, it's a fact that they meet the requirement. And, the guidelines are there. I know they're being relooked at, but we're not there yet. And it hasn't been voted on and decided upon. So I struggle a little bit with saying, why can't we say they've met the requirement, whether it feels good or not? It is black and white. They meet the requirement. So that lends me to be more okay with it. I like the design changes were mentioned, work for me, and with them meeting the requirement, I would be more apt to approve.
I think one of the ways to look at it would be, if we had never seen it with this additional 63 parking spaces, would you be approving this project right now based on them having the parking spaces that are required and looking at the architecture and, as Ms. Garland mentioned, all the things that we would normally require for a project like this? Does this project meet those guidelines? Forget we ever saw it with an additional 63 parking spaces. Just, I don't know. Would you like this project, looking at it from that standpoint?
So I agree with that perspective. My only concern is that we now set ourselves up for every developer to submit a project and then make this major amount of changes and then resubmit the project after we approve it. And then we go through the same process all over again.
Normally, it's very hard for them to resubmit with a really substantial change that is still meets all the requirements, but I could be wrong. Mr. Huddleston?
We're always allowed to resubmit even after approval. That's always been the case and hasn't changed. I like it when my clients make me design it twice also.
My concern is that even though we saw it a first time and now we're seeing it a second time, and Bill's getting paid twice, and I'm glad for Bill. But my concern is the quality of the product, and I think I'd have some concerns with, building to minimum standards is not really the direction that I want our city to go in. I mean, I usually ask for either some type of trade-off with amenities or something that really bumps it up when you're pushing it down towards the minimum standards. And I've just, I'm looking at 3 bedrooms and 4 parking places, and I just, I keep imagining Super Bowl Sunday or something when people have guests over, and I just, I saw it the first time and I thought it worked the first time, and I look at it this time and I'm just at the point that I just don't think it would work, and so that's my greater concern.
Mr. Huddleston?
Yeah, I want to remind you that we're only putting 12.5 units per acre on this, and we're zoned for 16. So So we're not fully packing it like it could be packed.
Okay, Planning Commission? Any other questions or thoughts, comments? And if not, we'll request a motion.
Madam Chair, Ken has his hand.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight. Mr. Halliburton?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Eddie on this. We don't always agree, but I'm going to make a motion that we deny the request, and then we'll see how it lands.
This is Ronnie. I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second to deny. Ms. Jaco?
Ms. Garland,
No.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes for denial. All right. Moving on to item B. 611 Fairview Avenue Townhomes, site plan for an existing single-family detached dwelling unit and the addition of 4 multifamily dwelling units on 0.47 acres, zoned RM16, located along the west side of Fairview Avenue, north of Ewing Boulevard. Eric Bloom is the developer. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Chair Jones, members of the Planning Commission. This is a site plan review for 611 Fairview Avenue, a residential development with an existing single-family detached dwelling unit and the addition of 4 multifamily attached dwelling units. The property is zoned RM16 and consists of 1 lot located on the west side of Fairview Avenue. It is 0.47 acres and has 1 access onto Fairview Avenue. The development will consist of the existing detached single-family dwelling unit and the addition of 4 2-story, 2-bedroom multifamily dwelling units. The building materials on the new units will be all brick on all elevations and will have rear patios. Staff will continue to work with the design team to resolve any outstanding staff comments upon Planning Commission approval, and Planning Commission approval should be subject to all staff comments. Myself and the engineer, Mr. Matt Taylor, are available to answer any questions that Planning Commission may have.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Mr. Taylor, did you have any comments before you hear from the Planning Commission?
No, ma'am. I think Ms. Kerr did a good job describing the project. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
Madam Chair, I'll make a comment. I do think this redevelopment or addition to the property is consistent with what we see close to the campus and around in those areas. And so I'd be in favor for it. And unless there are other comments, I'll make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I agree with Ronnie. I think the location is the key on this one to justify the situation that it presents as far as, I mean, I think it could be a little more desirable as far as just curb appeal, but maybe some bushes will help when they get some landscaping and stuff done. But I second this motion.
So we have a motion and a second. Ms. Jaco?
Ms. Garland,
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, moving on. Item C is 627 East Street, site plan for a duplex on 0.16 acres, zoned RM16, located along the west side of East Street, north of Ewing Boulevard. Kurt Bloom is the developer. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Chair Jones. This site plan is for 627 East Street, a residential development for a duplex and the demolition of one existing dwelling unit. The property is zoned RN16 and consists of one lot along East Street that is 0.16 acres and has only one access onto East Street. The development will consist of two-story, two-bedroom dwelling units consistent with the previous submittal that you saw. This is actually right around the corner from the previous application. The buildings on the material on the buildings are all brick on each elevation with rear patios. Staff will work with the design team to resolve any outstanding staff comments upon Planning Commission approval, and any Planning Commission approval shall be subject to all staff comments. I will be available to answer any questions, as well as Mr. Matt Taylor from the engineering company.
And so the architecture is the same, but it's really just going to be 2-unit building?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, other comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
Hearing none, I move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Jaco?
Ms. Garland,
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Our next item is the flats at 905 Southeast Broad Street, a site plan for multifamily apartment complex with 22 dwelling units on 1.42 acres, zoned RM16, located along the east side of Southeast Broad Street. John Zhang is the developer. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you. This is site plan review for the flats at 905 Southeast Broad Apartments, a residential development for 22 multifamily dwelling units. The property is zoned RM16 and consists of 2 lots along Southeast Broad Street. The site is 1.42 acres and has one access location onto Southeast Broad, and has an access easement which they're requesting to the adjoining property to the south. The development will consist of one 3-story building with 22 2-bedroom multifamily dwelling units. The building materials are brick and cementous siding, and there are some outstanding staff comments that the design team will need to address upon Planning Commission approval. So any Planning Commission approval should be subject to all staff comments. Myself and Matt Taylor are available to answer any questions. This property is actually 2 lots from the villas at Amanda Square that was reviewed at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
Kathy, it's Ken. Looking at the elevations, I know this is going to be a stupid question, but it looks like, is it the stairwell that's in the glass area, or what is that?
Which elevation are you talking about, Mr. Halliburton? That right there? Yes, sir.
A410? Yeah.
Yes, that would be the stairs.
So you're going to see the stairs through the window?
I think there's a certain portion of those that you will. And then there's going to be a certain portion in there, I'm sure, is going to be the solid. It's going to look like glass. It's kind of faux glass to hide the structural members.
Y'all, my laptop battery is running low and I'm getting ready to try to switch over to another laptop. I apologize. So if y'all will keep on with your comments and questions, and I'll try to listen in and ask for a motion when I need to, and hope I don't phase out before then.
Ken, if you will conduct the meeting until Madam Chair returns.
I will say also this development from Broad Street, it's going to actually look like a 2-story building. Only from the rear will you actually see the 3 side of the structure.
Yeah, the grade of the site dictated the architecture and the design. The site has 10 to 12 feet of fall at a pretty drastic location. I think there maybe used to be an existing building there that was torn down, and that's part of what was driving that, maybe an old basement house. So we tried to work with the grade rather than against it.
And just so while I'm chairing this, I do not see everybody. So Mr. McKnight, if someone's holding their hand up, if you'll acknowledge them.
Yes, sir.
Ken, this is Ronnie Martin. I just want to say, related to, I really like this development. I know a lot of times we have lots of discussions related to apartment sites, in our city and density in our city. But in comparison to, while I know this is apartments and the other we looked at previously, which is just down the street, was townhouses, this does not feel as forced onto the site to me as the other project did. And I think it's a great use of that site. So I'm certainly in favor of it.
Any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
Yeah, Ken, I agree with Ronnie on this. It certainly doesn't look forced onto the property. I think it's an attractive project, and I even like the glass stairwells, because personally, when I go back and think about apartments that I've been into where there's enclosed stairwells and stuff like that, there's always this kind of creepy feeling that I get, because I just don't feel secure. And with it being more open and more public like that, where people can see from the outside in to the stairwell, I think it's almost a plus. So I really I like the design of it, and I think it's a really nice looking project.
Thanks, Eddie. Any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
I just want to make sure I'm looking at the numbers correctly. This is Jennifer Garland. I see that the requirement for parking, I'm sorry, you may have said this, was 49 spaces and 51 are provided. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
Any other questions, comments, motions?
If there are no more comments, I'm happy to make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
And I know with the approval of this that we're approving more apartments, and we commonly get comments here in town, all you approve is apartments, and that's not really the case. But in this particular case, this property was already zoned multifamily. So we're not approving the zoning of it. We're actually approving what the property has the ability to build on it by right. So I'll second the motion.
Ms. Jacob, if you'll call roll.
Ms. Garland,
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
I think we've lost her.
Oops.
There she is.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I'm close this up. Sorry about that, y'all.
So Kathy, there was a motion to approve 7D, and you haven't had an opportunity to vote yet. If you would like to.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, y'all. Thank you, Mr. Halliburton.
So I'll hand it back to you for 7E, Kathy.
All right, thank you so much. So item E is Shalom Farms Apartments site plan for 348 unit apartment complex on 32.33 acres, zoned RM16, located along New Salem Highway. World Outreach Church is the developer. Ms. Rush.
Afternoon and welcome back, Chair Jones.
Oh.
Thank you. So the property is Shalom Farms Apartments is the proposal. It's on 32.33 acres. They're proposing 348 apartment units comprised of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The density on this acreage for this number of units is 10.8 dwelling units to the acre, and the property is zoned RM16. So this does come under the zoning density of 16 units to the acre. The primary entrance to the property is from Barfield Road. There is a second entrance that could access the site from Stony Meadows. The proposal includes a type D buffer along the north property line, which is adjacent to residential. And the proposal includes a list of various structures and uses, and I'll just go through those quickly. There are 10 three-story buildings. They're approximately 40 feet in height. There are going to be 8 one-story garage buildings. There are various structures for the amenities, which include a clubhouse, a pool house, a swimming pool, a pavilion, as well as a dog park, pedestrian paths, and an open play field as some of the amenities. The primary building materials are brick with cementitious siding. I did overlook letting you all know that the parking being provided is 720 spaces, which exceeds the zoning ordinance requirement of 697 spaces. And these are 9 foot wide by, I think, 18.5 foot length. So these are consistent with our parking requirements. I had touched on the building material is predominantly brick with cementitious siding. Staff had indicated in its staff comments under planning number 7 that there was a missing elevation. That elevation has been provided to staff. So if the commission chooses to recommend approval for this, I do recommend that condition be deleted as part of the requirements. With that, staff recommends any approval of the site be made subject to all the other remaining staff comments. Matt Taylor is here to represent the applicant, and I'll turn it over to Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. I think she did a good job walking through the project, described all the access points and architecture. So we think that it's a nice project, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rush. Mr. Taylor, do we have questions and comments from the Planning Commission?
Madam Chair, I do have one question. This is Ronnie. In looking at site plan, one thing, thinking back to our approval for the Hidden River Estates project, the Barfield Road section of this before it hits Shalom Street, my assumption is we'd obviously need this project to be completed in order to have that section of road to connect to that Hidden River Estates road that we talked about. Am I assuming right about that?
I can answer that if you'd like me to, Ms. Rush.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
The subdivision plan, so the roadway itself was on a subdivision plan set that we designed. You guys approved in 2019 and engineering has approved. And so the church is currently evaluating bids. I don't know the exact time frame for getting started on that, but the roadway for Barfield all the way back to 99, as well as the Shalom Street extension, are all a part of that, Mr. Martin.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
And Mr. Martin, I would add, just as a point of information, the area where the hand is that I'm moving around here,
yes.
And we just a couple of weeks ago received a preliminary plat for the development of that property by Mr. Burns, and we expect that to be on your agenda on May 20th.
Thank you, Matthew.
Okay, what other questions and comments do we have from the Planning Commission? Anything?
Kathy, if there are none, this is Ken Halliburton. I'll make a motion to approve subject to all staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Halliburton. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Smotherman, thank you. Ms. Jacob?
Ms. Garland,
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton,
Aye.
Mr. Martin,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Silas,
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman,
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And moving on to our last item under plats and plans, we have Costco Wholesale site plan for 154,134 square foot wholesale club building, fueling station, and 4,745 square foot car wash building on 18.64 acres, zoned light industrial, located along BC Road and Warrior Drive. Costco Corporation is the developer. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. So this is for Costco Wholesale Club building located at the intersection of BZ Road and Warrior Drive, just north of New Salem Highway. It is zoned not RM16, but light industrial, and it's on 18.64 acres. They are proposing 154,134 square foot building, which is the predominant retail area. It also has a car wash building, which is separate, and also a fueling station with canopy. The parking required by the zoning ordinance is 513 spaces. Costco is proposing to install 720 spaces, which is far exceeding the required by the zoning. This is in line with what their business model is. They want to make sure there is sufficient parking. The parking stall sizes, just for reference, are also larger than normal. They are 10 feet in width by 20 feet in length for each of them. They're also providing 17 accessible handicap spaces on site. Building materials of the property of the building are primarily metal panels. There are variations in colors. Mr. Blomley could go to the colored, there's a colored rendering, or there's also a material board that was included in the packet that will depict all the various materials that are being proposed. So Costco did attempt to, within their business model, they did attempt to meet the design guidelines as best as they could. They are proposing metal panels. The design guidelines do require masonry product for commercial uses. It does not require that for industrial uses, but for commercial retail it does. The secondary material that's allowed by the design guidelines are architectural metal panels. Costco provided a memorandum to the city to share with the Planning Commission why their business model requires this, and it has to do with energy efficiency and sustainability for their buildings. They also have very little void areas, which are typical of their buildings. Really, the only openings are where people can go in through the front door or through the auto area where they're having their cars serviced. Other than that, the buildings are pretty much contained and closed off. The building entrance includes structural columns. Those columns are encased in masonry product, which is the one area they were able to address that with masonry. The color palette is various shades of gray, and they do have variations to the roof line to try and break the building mass up quite a bit. Staff does recommend any approval of the site be subject to staff comments. The applicant's representative, Steve Warfield, is here. There's also several members from the team, the architectural team, the engineering team, that can answer any questions from the commission, as well as myself. I'm happy to answer any questions of the commission at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rush. Did we have, was there a specific request for anything from the developer that they wanted to go over, or should we just ask for questions from the Planning Commission?
This is Eric Bram with Costco Wholesale. I'm a director of real estate development, and we have met with the staff on several occasions and feel that their comments are in line. Be happy to answer any questions anyone has on the project.
Thank you, Mr. Bram, and welcome. Thank you. So, questions from the Planning Commission? Everybody's done their homework.
We may be the quietest, most excited people that I've ever seen. I think we're all probably excited about the opportunity to have Costco come into this community and the jobs that they bring, and the location I think will be a great location because it's close to the interstate. So those people who may be coming from out of town won't be crowding our city streets that are already well, today they're not because of COVID-19, but normally our streets are pretty crowded. And so I think it's a great opportunity for us to look at a business coming to town that has not been here before. And it will be an exciting addition to our community.
Well, at Costco, we are looking forward to being part of the community also.
Okay, thank you both. Any other comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
Well, I would agree with Ed. We are definitely looking forward to having someone the stature of Costco coming into the community. I would like for the guys at Costco to kind of address the variances from what our standards are. If they could just talk to that just a little bit and why.
Be happy to. Our corporate culture and the fact that, as my operators will tell me, we make money by the penny, requires us to make a building that's as efficient as possible. We also build a building that we know will last, because if you look through Costco's history, once we build a building in a location, we tend to be there for a very long time. We are purchasing this piece of property. Typically, this is what we do. We do have some cases where we lease properties and our lease, I have to budget a lease for 50 years because, well, frankly, we're going to be there a while. The building itself, the building envelope is, we use a prefabricated metal building. The metal panels on the exterior are warranted to us with their finish for 25 years. They enable us to get an R20 to 25 rating on the walls and enable us to build the building in a relatively short period of time. The building itself is also, because it is metal panels, they are made from the metal that are used is 85% recycled product. And at the end of the building's life, or the end of the metal panel's life, it is 100% recyclable. This gives us an advantage in that we're not utilizing raw materials. We're utilizing materials that already exist and have been recycled into these panels that are on the exterior of our building. Our roof structure contains an R30 value. The building is extremely efficient. It's a very well packaged envelope. And along the exterior walls of our building, we do not have windows because we have, if you've ever been inside a Costco, we have high pile storage up against all exterior walls. And that's not a conducive environment for windows, especially when the forklifts are pulling pallets up and down off of these racks. We do make an attempt to step the facade of the building so that it does break up the long walls and gives the building a smaller scale. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, it is a very large building. But we do our best to make it mix in with the surrounding areas. We feel this design mixes well with the surrounding buildings in the area. And again, this is what we build or try to build everywhere in the world. We now have 787 Costco's in operation around the world, 547 of which are in the United States. And we look forward to bringing our unique product mix and corporate culture to the Murfreesboro market.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if Ms. Rush would indulge me, if she could just go over a little bit about the lack of glass and windows relative to what the design guidelines requires. Thank you.
For commercial buildings, design guidelines requires 35%, and they're truly for void areas. So there really, as they had indicated, as Costco indicated, there really is not a whole lot of opportunity for those glass areas, other than I think the roll-up door. I'm not sure if that's glass for the main entrance or if that is metal as well, since it's rolled up in the rendering. The glass that is provided is the panels that are in between the columns at the main entrance. I think that's it. Is that the information you were looking for, Matthew?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Rush.
All right.
Okay, thank you both. Any other comments and questions from the Planning Commission?
So today, based on what you have today, what's the percentage today?
I would probably assume it's less than 1%. It's absolutely minimal.
Okay. I mean, I think the real challenge here is it's a mix of retail and industrial, and our standards probably don't address when you have that type of environment. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, in the industrial uses and zoning districts, those are not requirements that are imposed on industrial buildings. So this is that unique, kind of a combination industrial type of building for commercial use.
Right. Right.
I certainly think the you know, the changes as Mr. Brand referenced in the heights and the little bump outs here and there certainly helps with the mass of the building and gives it some, you know, architectural interest. And certainly they've had to had lots of experience at trying to make their buildings look nice along the way as they've going to be, if we're going to be number 547 or 548.
548.
We'll be 548. All right.
We may be seeing a sign program ordinance coming forward in the future for this property, is my assumption. There's been some early discussions, but I'm not sure, since that is done through Building and Codes Department, where the status of that is, but just wanted to give you all a heads up.
Okay. Other comments and questions? I'm sorry.
I'll just chime in. I'm glad Mr. Russell brought up the fact to really address the fact that we are not meeting the standards and that we're in a different situation with the use of the building. Just again, you know, if somebody were a small private standalone business that came in and wanted to set up a 10,000 square foot building and specialized in something that they sold on pallets, they'd be in a similar situation where they would want metal panels and, you know, a small percentage of glazing, and we probably wouldn't allow that. But this is definitely a situation where it's a national chain. It's known what type of product they provide. It would be a hard argument if you had a small private business coming in wanting to do something similar on a much smaller scale. But I do think it's important for this group, as you know, to address and say we're not setting precedents here. It is a situation where, again, you have a national company that this is what they do and they know how to do it and they do it well. I appreciate the way you've addressed the architecture with the panels. You've done a good job. I wouldn't expect to come in and say, you know, we've got to force 35% glazing in here. It's not the right decision, but I do think it's important to address the fact that we are consciously acknowledging that it's not being met. And just, you know, for others in the future that would want to come and say, well, you let Costco do it, but you wouldn't let, you know, some small business do it. I think it's important to discuss.
Yes.
That said, I'm okay with it, but I think it's important to just address it very loud and clearly.
Very true. Thank you, Ms. Garland. Other comments and questions? I'm not seeing everybody, so I don't see other hands or anything. If anybody would like to speak, please go ahead and there we go. Anybody else on the Planning Commission?
Kathy, this is Ken. If there are no further comments, I'll make a motion that we approve subject to all staff comments.
Thank you, Mr. Halliburton. Is there a second?
No, I'll second that.
Mr. Russell, thank you. Ms. Jacob will take a vote.
Ms. Garland?
Aye.
Mr. Halliburton?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Silas?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you very much. And again, we're excited to have you all here in Murfreesboro. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, we have new business. And I don't see anything listed under new business. So,
Madam Chair, I have
Mr. Ives.
just to tell you, I have nothing.
Okay, all right. I thought maybe you'd come up with something.
Kathy, can I give David a question?
Yes, you can, Mr. Smotherman.
Okay, I like to make David earn his money. Somebody has asked me the question about the apartments that were being built by World Outreach. Those will be assessed at the 40% property tax rate like any other apartment or building of that type. Is that correct? That's not considered part of the church.
No, that is not tax exempt property that will be taxed like any other apartment complex will be taxed.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Mr. Harney. We want to, Mr. Harney, turn on your, unmute yourself. Thank you.
Is that better?
That's better. Thanks.
Okay. Just to be clear, World Outreach Church is not going to develop these apartments. We were under contract with an apartment development group out of Florida, and at the 11th hour, they asked for a very long additional length of time, which we were unwilling to do. There are 2 or 3 other apartment groups that are very interested in moving forward on this site. So we felt it prudent to go ahead and get the site plan and the elevations, all aspects of this approved. But World Outreach is not going to build and lease these apartments. Someone else, we will sell this site to someone else to do that, which will naturally keep it on the tax rolls.
Okay.
John, I think you just cleared up a article that was written in the News Journal in the last couple of days saying that World Outreach was building them. So hopefully, I know Scott Broden's watching, and hopefully he'll correct that in this afternoon's publication.
I hope it does as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harney. Anything else under new business before we go to staff reports and other business? Anybody have anything to report there? No?
No, ma'am.
Okay. If there is no other business, then thank you all for joining us on this meeting today. And we do now stand adjourned. Thank you.